So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jeremy James. I'm the founder and managing partner of OwnNet. We're a consulting firm with a unique, high-value, low-cost, client-centered model, helping clients to deliver transformation and assurance projects. I have with me my co-presenter, Hussein Kakavand, who's the co-founder and CEO of Luther Systems, which you will hear more about during the webinar. The session will last up to an hour, and there'll be plenty of time for questions. At the bottom of your screen, you should see the Q&A box, so please add any questions to that, and we will endeavour to answer these at the end of the session. So today we will take you through, if you go to the next slide, the importance of being operational resilient, what it means to be inherently resilient, and take you through the problems that are faced by organizations with complex processes. And then we'll look at how the Luther platform using smart contracts is able to help build that resilience, and take you through some examples of where we have deployed deep automation in the past. So next slide, and next. So to just set a little bit of the scene, crises happen all the time. They can be driven by factors such as weather, war, terrorism, fraud, etc. The one thing that we do know is that they do occur time after time, with large events happening on a periodic basis. What we don't know is whether they're going to be local, down to the individual firm or into a marketplace, or whether it will be something national or global in nature, and also whether they're avoidable or not, and how long they may last and how long the effect of them may last as well. But what we do know is that every single disruption and crises does have different characteristics and different impacts on business and the ability to serve clients. So really the big question is, how can we develop the operational resilience needed to ensure that we can face the next unknown crises and be ready to recover quickly, and where possible, and if appropriate, take advantage of any opportunities that may arrive. So this is really the big motivation to be operationally resilient. So next, so, you know, to add a bit of more to this, you know, this is about, you know, maybe it's not just about will you thrive, but it could be termed as will you survive. The lifespan of companies is decreasing rapidly over time, and as a demonstration of this, the half of the S&P 500 companies won't be in the S&P in the next 10 years, and the average lifespan of companies in the index now is forecast to be reduced to 12 years by 2028. From 33 years back in 1965. There's a lot of reasons that this occurs, but some of the key reasons are the inability for firms to respond to change and disruption from crises, or competition, or market trends. And this is caused by sort of a lack of inertia within those businesses and the lack of agility. And with the rise of digital capability, businesses are needing to become more and more agile. And with the rise of companies that are transforming to become digital, with 75% of those forecast to have gone through a transformation by 2030, there isn't really much choice. Companies do have to transform, they do have to stay resilient to all of the different disruptions and impacts that they may start to realize over time. But it's not, just an easy journey of let's transform. There are a lot of challenges to transformation, as indicated by a lot of studies that, and these numbers range from 5% of companies will see value to, down to 70%, but that roughly 85% of transformations do not add the value that was expected. And so, that understanding of why leaders are unable to drive that change due to lack of understanding of the goals and the agreement of what is going to be put in place, a siloed approach to the way these are driven, and also being hampered by reactive day-to-day activities. So again, this is where the resilience being built into an organization is absolutely key to ensure that you can drive a much higher percentage of chance of transformation. So, next, please. So, to demonstrate this, when you look at the left-hand side of this slide, majority of companies who really are at risk spend a lot of their effort and cost on operations and reporting. And this is not an entitled cost and effort. This is cost and effort because people are reworking, they are checking, they are doing a lot of manual intervention, making sure that behind the scenes, the clients are being serviced in as much as a value-added way, but under the surface, people are paddling like mad. Now, the firms that are resilient are moving all of their efforts and cost to the value-added areas where they can analyze the business, they can become agile, they can look at their strategies, they can start to ensure that they can be resilient to the changes that are going to happen, and also when we have crises and impacts in the marketplace, and be ready for that. And this is really where, resilience of firms comes in, and making sure that they are able to, prevent the large impact of a disruption, be agile to it, put a focus on the recovery through that, and building knowledge so that they are even more resilient to the next disruption. So next. So what does it mean to actually be resilient? So operational resilience is basically the ability of an organization to 1, prevent, 2, adapt, 3, respond, 4, recover, and 5, finally learn from that operational disruption. They should be able to build that resilience into the organization. And this isn't a new concept. This is a concept that has been around through risk management, through business continuity planning, through disaster recovery, etc. However, it's about bringing this together, putting the focus of this on an external viewpoint, and thinking of it from how can you carry on ensuring that the delivery to a customer, or a delivery that is going to be impacting on the market, will stay in place. And now through the pandemic, this is something that has really taken a big focus on. Now, pre the focus, the UK financial services regulators went into a consultation to bring in a new regulation, which has recently had its final rules published, and will come into effect on the 31st of March next year. However, it doesn't mean that this is just related to a financial services sector. This is goes across all sectors, and the importance of being resilient is obviously at the forefront now, with everybody seeing what has happened going through the pandemic. So to actually build this resilience, oh, sorry, next slide, Hussein. We need to ensure that, you know, there's a full understanding of the organization, and this starts with the customers and understanding the products and services that are being sold to those customers and delivered to those customers. And then importantly, being able to understand in detail the processes and enablers of those processes, i.e. the people, the suppliers, any outsourced third parties, the facilities that people are working from, whether that be machines, the buildings that they're working in, obviously the technology that underpins that, and the data. And to ensure that there is that understanding, you need to go through quite a big exercise of identifying all of the different elements of your customers, what those services and products are delivered to those different customer groups in their different ways, and be able to model how this is all pulled together with those processes and those enablers. And once you've understood that landscape, it is then about starting to set the impact tolerances and set an understanding of your vulnerabilities within each of those business services and product streams that are in place. And once you've set those, you can then start to set the scenarios that are driving all of these different vulnerabilities that you need to be able to keep an eye on, and then ultimately be able to test to ensure that they do stay within your set tolerances, but also, more importantly, to remediate those issues so that those vulnerabilities, albeit they will still remain, can be handled in the right way so that there is that agility to be able to adapt, respond, and recover from any disruption. Now, this whole piece around building operational resilience is not a one-off piece of work. This is building a foundation that will carry on being built on. And within that, therefore, you need to make sure that there's a full design of the governance and framework that underpins that. And that really involves pulling those communication plans together, having structures within the organization, and having visibility of that enterprise so that you can manage it on an ongoing basis. And that is very much driven by being able to have lots of different stakeholders looking at that enterprise through multiple different lenses, but ensuring that they're seeing the same view as everybody else. Now, the way that that is obviously maintained and driven is by building it on some fundamental systems and platforms that allow you to, one, automate what is being done so that you can start to put proofing in place, tracking so that you can understand when an impact is being or looking like it may affect a business service, and ensuring conformance of people that are working within that environment. And finally, it's pulling all of the risk management capabilities together to keep that forward-looking view, to ensure that all of those disruptions are understood and can be reacted to in the right way. And so this is where the Luther automation platform really does come into its own. So I'll now hand over to Hussein to take us through how the Luther platform can facilitate the operational resilience.
Great. Thank you so much, Jeremy. So let's start with, to build on what Jeremy was saying, let's start with the types of problems that are faced by organizations with complex processes and build towards how our platform is enabling a solution to be built in an operationally resilient way. So the very first question is, what is a complex process? We usually think of it as, if you have a process that has many tasks, logical roles, and is run through multiple different participants that are operated separately, whether they're teams, groups, systems, organizations, companies, that's a complex process to us. Now, towards that, let's look at what usually goes wrong in executing a complex process. So because of this complexity and the fragmentation, you have limited verification across the process. There are errors in executing the various steps of it. And then there's a lack of orchestration in the execution of these various steps. The result of all of this is that there's friction in executing the process. Now, zooming out a bit, we tend to think of business process space as really having 4 segments. There are super simple processes, complex processes, and super complex processes, where they loosely correspond to: super simple means 1 to 10 tasks and logical rules. Simple, 10 to 100 tasks and logical rules. Complex, 100 to 1,000, and super complex, thousands of tasks and logical rules. For each of these segments, there are a number of companies that are doing great work in automating their segment of the stack, of the complexity stack. So for super simple processes, you have robotic process automation, where there are companies like UiPath and Crayon, which are quite active and doing a great job in automating those types of simple tasks, validated primarily through the very impressive showing of UiPath's IPO last week. Above that in the stack, we have workflow automation, where companies like Pega, Appian, and Software AG are making a big impact in automating those types of simple processes. On the other end of the spectrum, we have companies like SAP and Accenture that effectively develop bespoke software for your specific process. Now, there is this layer of complex processes, which are between 100 to 1,000 tasks and logical rules. These processes can be automated and become much more operationally resilient. It's just at the moment, there's limited offering in that space. So going back to the definition that Jeremy mentioned, let's look at how we can actually solve this friction problem and make them operationally resilient. Just a reminder, operational resilience was the ability to prevent, adapt, respond to, recover from, and learn from operational disruptions. Today, there is, as we talked about, there's friction in executing these complex processes, which makes them quite vulnerable. Now, to achieve operational resilience, we need to automate, track, ensure conformance, and manage risk for these complex processes. And this was as Jeremy mentioned in his slides. To get to these capabilities, at Luther, we've developed a distributed automation platform for these complex processes, which ultimately has enabled our clients to achieve operational resilience, and we'll go through the details of all of this. So in the next couple of slides, I'll talk about exactly how friction affects complex processes and makes them vulnerable and ultimately prevents an enterprise from achieving operational resilience. And once we've established how friction makes them these processes more vulnerable, we'll go into how our platform is actually preventing these frictions. We'll then follow up with an overview of a few of our clients' processes and a case study specifically on mortgages and insurance sourcing, on which we've actually helped our clients achieve operational resilience using our platform. Okay, so how does friction lead to process disruption and prevent operational resilience? You have these processes that have multiple manual and non-standard steps. They're slow, siloed, and bespoke in their execution. You get errors that go unnoticed and they propagate basically to the end of the process, at which point they're detected and there's reconciliation and you have to come back and figure out what went wrong. There's lack of visibility of the process map itself, where we've encountered this issue multiple times of you ask a client, what is your process map? And it takes them a few weeks to answer that question. And then you have compliance checking, which is a very important and integral part of many of the processes that we deal with. And a lot of that is manual and quite fragmented. The result of all of this is that there is a lack of ability to prevent process disruptions. Now, we also have the multiple manual steps and non-standard steps, and the slow and siloed and bespoke execution, again, contributing further to a lack of ability to adapt to process disruptions. Similarly, it's difficult to see where the process is. The execution status is opaque, and there's lack of visibility and limited oversight into the execution, which further contributes to a lack of ability to respond to process disruptions. The opaque process execution status and the errors going unnoticed then also contribute to lack of ability to recover from process disruptions. And finally, opaque process execution status also contributes to a lack of ability to learn. So we can see that a bunch of problems associated with executing complex processes effectively are contributing strongly to preventing all the definitions of operational resilience and what is required to achieve operational resilience. So all of this was a negative set of facts that talked about the status of these processes today. Let's see how smart contracts can actually help. What we've done at Luther is built a distributed platform which effectively sits alongside the distributed problem that I was talking about earlier. So you have these multiple participants, they're siloed, they can't see what the others are doing, and you have all sorts of issues that we talked about earlier. And the distributed platform sits alongside this distributed problem, and it employs a smart contract that's shared by all of these nodes across the platform, which basically orchestrates the process. So how does this work? The smart contract goes to node 1. It triggers and communicates the data to the first node. It waits for the operations of that step or process to complete. It monitors the completion of that. It shares that result with the rest of the nodes, the rest of the network. They all verify it, they all store it. And then the smart contract says, okay, it's time for step 2. It triggers and communicates and so on. So it's effectively creating this operating system for the entire process to execute. All right. So that's how the platform works. Going back to Jeremy's point, we need to automate, track, ensure conformance, and manage risk of these compliance processes to make them operationally resilient. So let's look at how our platform can do that. As we just talked about this, smart contracts trigger, communicate, execute, monitor, and verify all process steps without human intervention, basically achieving automation. The smart contract also acts as a governance manual for executing the whole process, and it's visible to all participants. Also, every step requires confirmation by all parties. Both of these two features contribute to conformance to the process execution. On risk management, so we have over-the-air updates, which basically allow one of these participants to change their process step, communicate that to the whole process, to the whole various participants in the process. They all update their scripts. So you can do this real time without any disruption to the operations. There's also an ability to add and drop participants if there's an issue with any of them. And this makes the platform much more adaptive to new environments. And all of this results in better risk management. On tracking, there's clear visibility of process execution and governance. You can very easily detect deviations from the normal course of execution by any of the participants. This also allows for near real-time root cause analysis of any issues, of anything that goes wrong. Every transaction is also recorded and stored, and the execution is also closely monitored. And there's a very clear process map, which is represented as the actual smart contract itself. All of these collectively contribute to the ability to track the process execution. So all four are achieved using our platform. Okay, so let's look at what we've actually done for our clients. We've actually implemented the platform for 5 of our clients. There is mortgage and insurance sourcing process. I apologize. There is, for a subsidiary of Aviva, there is digital asset issuance and transference for DLA Piper, next generation network inventory and infrastructure management for very large South African-based telco. There is common claims, fraud detection, and global customer 360 view. And for each of these, we've achieved automation, conformance, risk management, and tracking. Some are in production, some we're still discussing the steps towards production. So let's look at specifically one application, which is the mortgage and insurance sourcing process. So the process itself starts with as a customer, go to a broker. The broker asks me a series of questions related to my personal information, my financial information, my employment history, tax, and so on. The broker then takes that information and independently verifies that using several different external sources. The broker then actually confirms my eligibility for getting a certain type of mortgage or a certain type of insurance policy. Then they go out to the various lenders and insurers and collect the appropriate set of mortgages and insurance policies. They bring them back, we select one. The broker then submits an application and gets that approved. At the end of this process, there is a pretty intense manual compliance check, and I pay the broker, the process is complete. So let's look at a few critical points of how this is executed today. This is a fragmented process with multiple participants, as we just saw. It's a complex process with many rules and checks. There is no standard documents and data format for the whole process. compliance is actually executed by a separate team. There is a large number of these manual compliance checks. And then there's a high degree of manual work required by several different teams, as we just saw in the process map. The result of all of this is that this is quite an operationally vulnerable process. Okay, so all of this is well and good, but the pain points of these processes that all of these critical points result in are, this is a pretty labor-intensive process. It's slow and expensive to operate. It's quite error-prone. The errors propagate and are only detected at the end of the process. And it's quite opaque and difficult to monitor the progression of the process. That, in turn, results in several months of delays, millions spent in reconciling the process, millions spent in checking compliance. There are thousands of compliance rules, and ultimately quite low customer satisfaction because of all of these issues. So what our platform has enabled to happen is they built the mortgage and insurance sourcing process on top of our platform, which enables an automated next generation process with automated sourcing, process and progress monitoring by the brokers, automated checks and rule verification, close overview of the process execution and its progression. The result of all of this is a 85% reduction in operational cost, the automation of the checking of these thousands of compliance rules, and a 90% reduction in the account approval time. So you can see the four components, the four objectives that we set out to accomplish were accomplished, which were, we've automated the process, we're tracking the process execution, we're tracking conformance to the process map, and we're managing risk on this platform. So to summarize, friction in the mortgage and insurance sourcing process makes it vulnerable, which prevents our clients from achieving operational resilience. With our platform, we've automated, tracked, ensured conformance, and managed risk. This allows our clients to prevent, adapt, respond to, recover, and learn from operational disruptions. And ultimately, this allows our clients to achieve operational resilience. Thank you so much. And over to Irina.
Thank you, Hussein. So let's move on now to the Q&A section. I have a few questions here with me already that people have asked. So the first question is, what benefit does blockchain add to the automation solution?
I can take that. So blockchain is, we think of blockchain from first principles. It is a technology that enables a number of separate participants who have a shared interest in executing a process without any of them having to take over the execution of the whole process. So the distributed nature of the problem makes it a perfect match for the distributed nature of the platform that we have. Effectively, the problem is that there are several siloed participants, and usually a centralized solution doesn't work because effectively there are several technical issues, but you effectively added yet another point of yet another silo. Because if your process had like 5 steps, now you've effectively created a 6th one, which is supposed to orchestrate the whole process, but in reality it's like 6 separate systems now. Our platform basically uses blockchain nodes to sit alongside each of these separate participants, communicate with the smart contract across the whole process without allowing any of the participants to deviate from the smart contract, which is the process map, and execute the whole process. So that's the advantage of using blockchain to create a distributed platform.
Thanks, Hussein. Someone said, you mentioned the new operational resilience regulation for financial services. Can you please give a little more information on this?
Yeah, I'll take this one. So yes, pre the pandemic, the joint regulators for financial services, so the Bank of England, the PRA, and the FCA, have went through a consultation to look at operational resilience, and it was very much focused on ensuring that any financial services firm, any FMI is able to carry on delivering services to clients during a plausible disruption, but also ensuring that any impacts that may impact the firm or the market integrity can be de-risked. And that consultation finished back in October. The end of March, the final rules were published, and there is quite a tight timeline between now and when the rules come into place and are adopted on 31st of March next year, where all financial services firms who are regulated firms will need to be able to identify their important business services. And to do that, they will have to map the processes that underpin those. And they will also need to set their impact tolerances and identify their vulnerabilities within those processes that deliver those important business services. Once they've done that, they need to start kicking off their testing regime of different scenarios of different disruption types. And they will need to identify those vulnerabilities. Now, as I said earlier, a lot of this is built on risk management, business continuity planning, etc., that has been put in place before, but it will mean making sure that there's an assessment of what there is, can those artifacts be used, and a governance framework put over the top of everything that is in place to actually be able to report to the board in an assessment where the firm is in relation to their important business services and the resilience of those. Once they've done that by the end of March, there is then a period of remediation, and the rules say that it's as soon as possible, but they do go out to 2025 to be able to remediate any of those vulnerabilities. So there's a lot of work to be done, especially in the next sort of 11 months. But there, as I said, it does build on previous pieces of work. We will be running some follow-up webinars that are specific to financial services on what needs to be done to be ready for the 31st of March next year. So you'll see those coming out soon as well.
Thanks, Jeremy. So the next question is, what do you think of the UiPath IPO?
So I can take this one. We are very excited about this, primarily because process automation has gone through generations of advances, but the most recent wave of innovation in it has been very, very exciting and very effective and impactful. So UiPath represents the strongest validation so far of the effectiveness of robotic process automation for automating very simple processes. Now, they're using techniques such as vision and artificial intelligence. But the ultimate view is that if you take an enterprise, a large enterprise, they probably have hundreds of thousands of these like very simple tasks, which UiPath has very simply, through a great product, automated. Now, these very simple tasks are really each of them are part of a workflow. There are a number of great companies that are following in UiPath's footsteps in automating those simple tasks, simple workflows. And each of the processes that we talked about, like the complex processes, are effectively a collection of these workflows. So you can clearly see the need for automation across this pyramid of applications, where you can think of an enterprise as having a few very complex processes, thousands of complex processes, tens of thousands of workflows, and hundreds of thousands of very simple tasks. And UiPath has brilliantly started from the bottom of the stack and has done a great job using the technology that it has to automate those simple tasks. You need different technologies for different parts of this pyramid. And we're very encouraged and excited by the fact that this whole space is getting a lot of validation through this honestly great IPO that they had. And you can see various companies coming down the pipe of automating workflows, complex processes. So yeah, very excited about that.
Great, thanks, Hussein. The next question is, during this pandemic, haven't most companies shown that they are now operationally resilient?
So I can take that one again. So I think, our experience, for all of us during the pandemic, everyone has seen companies do a fantastic job at reacting to the current situation, especially in the early days, setting up ability for people to work from home and making sure that there is technology enablers for that to happen. However, I wouldn't necessarily say that has made companies resilient. It has put a focus onto what is required to be able to make sure that companies can, one, prevent some of the risks, and two, be agile to them. And a lot of different types of risks obviously start to materialize with different ways of working. So as an example, with people working from home on their own networks, there is a different risk. The way that firms are able to monitor and audit the way that their staff are working when outside of a contained environment changes. And it doesn't focus on all the different types of disruptions that there may occur. So I think now is a time where, boards are very much looking at how they can really industrialize the way that they become resilient, that it isn't something that is ad hoc. And at the same time with that, as I said, you've got regulation coming in within financial services, and I think we'll see that coming across other key industry sectors as well.
Great, thank you, Jeremy. Now the last question that we have is, one of the biggest hurdles we have with automation is capturing our processes at the right granularity. How do you overcome this?
I can take this one again as well. So you're absolutely right. That is one of the hardest parts of doing any form of modeling of processes to the right detail to be able to configure and develop solutions. And when you are using, sort of workshops and, you've got people in a room, you're only capturing what people remember, the loudest person in the room, etc., etc. Now there is now technology, and there's something that actually we've been driving forward around automated process modeling. This leverages robotic process discovery and process mining to be able to interrogate processes at a very granular level. And because they are being recorded as people do their work, every variant of a process is captured, and only an objective view of that process is also captured. So you really do see what is actually happening down at, a keystroke mouse click level, and you can drive that up through the process levels. So there is now that automation capability, and it really does add a huge amount of benefit for capturing especially complex processes. But I would actually say for any process, if you're going into RPA, if you can capture those processes using automation, it'll be a lot more accurate, a lot more insightful, and a lot more comprehensive than if you're using workshops and you'll have that rework process. And I think that's also shown by some of the service costs that are being pulled in for trying to capture the right level of process in especially complex processes.
Great. Thank you, Jeremy. That brings us to the end of the Q&A session. I'll hand it back over to you to say a couple of closing words.
Lovely. Thanks, Irina. So thank you everyone for attending. I hope that you found it useful. This was very much a sort of introduction to how operational resilience can be implemented, and how the Luther platform using the smart contracts can facilitate the ability to be resilient and withstand those disruptions. So I hope that we got that across, and I look forward to following up with everyone and discussing your challenges around this area in the near future. So thank you very much for attending, and look forward to speaking very soon. Thank you.